Captain Teo knew that he was going to die. He could feel it in his bones as the colony ship Aurora fell from the sky like a broken bird. The navigation system had failed. The engines were dead, and all around him alarms sang their terrible song. The radiation storm had come without warning, a wall of invisible energy that the ship could not survive. Teo sat in the pilot's seat with his hands still gripping the controls, even though they did not work anymore. Around him, other crew members were already putting on their emergency suits and gathering supplies. His head hurt from where he had hit it against the console. Blood dripped slowly down his face and onto his uniform. The ship hit the ground hard. Everything went black for a moment, and then Teo found himself on the jungle floor, covered in smoke and the smell of burned metal. His suit had protected him, but his left leg screamed with pain, and his left arm did not move the way it should. He pulled himself up using only his right arm and right leg. The damaged suit's systems flickered weakly. The distress beacon that should have called for help was silent. The communication equipment was nothing but broken pieces now. Teo looked around at the jungle. It was not like anything he had studied in the colony files. The plants were tall and twisted, with skin like metal and leaves that shone with an oily light. The sky above was dark red, not blue. Even the air smelled wrong, full of strange chemicals and things that made his nose burn. He told himself that rescue would come. The Aurora had sent a distress signal before it crashed. Someone would find him. Someone would come. He walked for 6 hours. His injured leg was the only thing that measured time for him. With each step, the pain grew worse. His suit told him his vital signs were falling, his blood pressure dropping. He should find shelter soon or he would fall and never get up again. That was when he heard the sound. It was small and weak, like an animal calling for its mother. Teo moved toward the sound through the thick plants, his heart beating faster. The sound came from beneath a fallen tree that was as thick as a house. He got down on his knees, pain shooting through his injured leg, and looked into the shadows. 3 creatures huddled in the darkness. In the weak light from Teo's suit, he could see their shapes. They had long bodies, smooth black skin like polished stone, and claws that were long and curved and sharp as any blade. Their eyes were round and bright, burning like fire in the darkness. They were moving, making small sounds of fear and hunger. Teo knew what these things were. He had studied them in the database before landing on this world. These were young Vexitharians, apex predators of this planet. They were dangerous. They had teeth and claws designed to kill. They were the reason the colony was being built far from the jungle in the highlands where these creatures could not easily hunt. Behind the 3 young ones lay another Vexitharian, much larger. This one did not move. Even from far away, Teo could see that it was dead. The mother. She had probably died trying to protect her young ones, or perhaps she had been killed by a rival predator. It did not matter now. She was gone, and her babies were alone. Teo's logical mind told him to walk on. These were dangerous creatures. They would grow into killers. If he helped them, he would only be helping predators that one day might hunt humans. He should find shelter, wait for rescue, survive. That was the logical thing to do. But Teo had always been more than just logic. The largest of the 3 cubs saw Teo first. It made a sound like grinding metal, a noise of warning and fear. The other 2 turned to look at the human. The smallest one, just barely larger than a small dog, took a step backward. Teo could see that it was hurt, its black skin cut and bleeding, its breathing shallow and weak. It was dying. Teo moved slowly, keeping his hands visible and open. He had learned this once in a training program about approaching frightened animals. Move slowly, show no threat. Speak in a calm voice. He did not know if a Vexitharian cub would understand human speech, but he tried anyway. "Hello there," Teo said, his voice soft as he could make it. "I am not going to hurt you. I know you are scared. I know you are hungry. Your mother is gone, but you are not alone now. I will not leave you." The largest cub opened its mouth, showing teeth that were already long and dangerous. But it did not attack. It watched Teo with those burning amber eyes, trying to understand what this strange creature was doing here. The smallest cub, the injured one, made a small whimpering sound. It was a sound so full of pain and loneliness that Teo felt something break in his chest. He reached into his emergency pack and pulled out a nutrition bar. It was meant for humans, but he broke it into small pieces and set them on the ground between himself and the cubs. Then he moved back, giving them space. The cubs watched him, their eyes darting from his face to the food and back again. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the middle cub stepped forward. Its claws clicked on the hard ground. It smelled the food carefully, then ate. The other two cubs came forward then. The largest one, which Teo would later name Hai-Il, ate quickly, as if afraid the food would disappear. The smallest one, Ji-Wan, ate slowly, as if her body could barely remember how. Teo sat on the ground and watched them eat. His leg hurt, his head hurt, his arm hurt. But he watched the three young predators eat the food he had given them, and something inside him felt a little bit better. When they finished eating, the cubs did not attack him. Instead, they came closer. The middle one, Q, sniffed at Teo's suit. Hai-Il sat down, his long tail wrapping around his body. Ji-Wan, still weak and hurt, simply lay down on the ground. She was so small. She looked so fragile. Teo reached out his right hand slowly. He waited. Then he touched the top of her head gently. Her skin was warm and smooth, not like anything he had touched before. Ji-Wan made a small sound, not a growl or a threat, but something else, something that might have been acceptance. She closed her eyes. Teo looked at the three cubs around him and at the dead mother behind them. He thought about the colony waiting for him in the highlands. He thought about rescue teams that might never come. He thought about the logical choice, the safe choice, the human choice. "All right, kids," he said to the three young predators. "Close enough to family, then. We will keep each other alive. That is all we can do now." He did not know that these three cubs would change everything. He did not know that the choice he made in that moment would echo across the stars and reshape the future of his entire species. He only knew that he could not leave them. He could not walk away. He could not leave them to die alone in the dark. So Teo sat with his back against the fallen tree, one hand resting gently on Ji-Wan's head, and he waited for tomorrow to come. The cubs huddled around him in the gathering darkness. The red sky faded to black. Stars began to appear above the jungle, strange stars in a strange sky, but stars nonetheless. And for the first time since the aurora had crashed, Teo felt something like hope. The emergency rations lasted exactly 4 days. Teo counted each meal carefully, dividing the bars into smaller and smaller pieces as the supply grew thin. He gave most of the food to the cubs. They needed to grow strong, and his suit still had some nutrition systems, though they were not very good. The food tasted like dirt and chemicals, but it kept him alive. On the morning of the 5th day, Teo opened the emergency supply box and found nothing. He looked at the three cubs who were watching him with intelligent eyes. Hai-Il tilted his head as if asking a question. "Well," Teo said out loud, "we need to figure out how to hunt." This was a problem. Teo had never hunted anything in his life. He had grown up in cities on distant planets where food came from markets and restaurants. The only weapons he had were tools that had survived the crash, pieces of metal and plastic that might be useful if he was smart enough to use them correctly. He spent that first day crafting a simple spear from a long branch and a piece of sharp metal from the ship's hull. It took hours. His hands shook. The pain in his leg was getting worse, not better. The cubs watched him work. Hai-Il watched most carefully, his head tracking every movement. Teo realized that the big cub was learning, trying to understand what the human was doing. When Teo finally finished, he showed the spear to the three cubs. "This," he said, pointing to the spear, "is how we survive." The cubs made sounds at him, grinding metal noises mixed with clicks and chirps. Teo had started to notice patterns in their communication. When they were hungry, the sounds were fast and sharp. When they were calm, the sounds were low and rolling. Jiwan, the smallest, made different sounds than Hai-Il. Her sounds were almost musical sometimes. Teo began to repeat the sounds back to them, trying to learn their language the way they might be learning his. On the morning of the 7th day, Teo found a small creature near the water source, a thing with 6 legs and a shell on its back. He managed to hit it with his spear. It took 3 strikes, and his hands were shaking the whole time. The creature was not much larger than his hand, but it was meat. He showed it to the cubs. Q, the middle one, approached the dead creature and sniffed it carefully. Then he looked back at Teo and made a series of clicking sounds. Teo didn't understand the sounds, but he understood the look in Q's eyes. Q was checking to see if the food was safe. After a moment, Q made a different sound, something approving and low. The cubs could have eaten the entire creature without sharing, but they didn't. They waited for Teo to cook it first. He built a fire using pieces from the wreck and a piece of mirror from his suit to focus the sun's light. The smell of cooking meat filled the small clearing. Days became weeks. Teo's routine became automatic. Wake up, check the cubs' wounds and health, hunt, cook, teach, sleep. The jungle, which had seemed so terrifying on that first day, became almost familiar. He learned which plants could be eaten and which would make him sick. He learned how to move more quietly, how to track animals by looking for broken branches and footprints, and most importantly, he learned the language of his 3 young companions. By the 2nd week, Teo had identified at least 50 different sounds that the cubs made, and each sound meant something specific. A long, rolling growl meant it was time to eat. A sharp chirp meant danger nearby. A quiet, almost musical clicking sound meant contentment. Teo practiced the sounds, and the cubs seemed to find it funny when he got them wrong. They would make the correct sound again and again until he got it right. It was like having 3 teachers who were also your children. Jiwan became his shadow. Wherever Teo went, the small female followed. She was still weak, her body scarred from whatever had hurt her before he found her, but she was growing stronger every day. She watched everything he did with complete focus, as if committing every action to memory. When Teo showed her how to crack open a shell to get to the meat inside, she practiced for an hour until she could do it herself. When he showed her how to find fresh water by following the sound of insects, she learned it in minutes. Q was different. He was curious about everything, and not always in safe ways. He would wander too far from the camp, sometimes getting lost. Once, he came back bleeding from a long cut across his shoulder. Teo treated the wound as best he could, wrapping it with cloth from his suit. As he worked, Q made soft sounds, and Teo thought the cub might be in pain. He spoke to Q gently, the way he might speak to a frightened child. "I know it hurts," Teo said, "but you need to be more careful, okay? I can't always help you if you get hurt far away from here." Q listened to his voice, if not his words. The cub seemed to understand that Teo cared about what happened to him. Hai-Il was the leader of the 3, as Teo had always known he would be. The largest cub was strong and smart, and his decisions kept the other 2 safe. But Hai-Il also had a gentleness about him, especially when dealing with the injured Jiwan. He would often lie next to her at night, sharing his body warmth, and he watched Teo constantly, learning from him in ways the human could barely understand. One morning, 6 weeks after the crash, HFY brought Tayo a fresh kill. The cub approached the human carefully, the small creature still warm in his mouth. He dropped it at Tayo's feet and made a questioning sound, a series of low growls that seemed to be asking something important. Tayo stared at the dead creature, and then at HFY's face, and understanding struck him like a physical blow. HFY was feeding him. The cub had watched Tayo hunt for weeks. He had learned what the human needed to survive, and now, in the way of predators and pack animals, HFY was providing for the weakest member of their group. Because Tayo was weak compared to the cubs. He was slow, he was injured. He could not run fast or climb high or fight other predators. To HFY, this made Tayo a member of the pack that needed protection. Tayo felt tears forming in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Thank you, HFY." The cub made a pleased sound and lay down beside him, his head resting against Tayo's leg. That night, as Tayo sat with the 3 cubs around him, with Jiwon curled against his chest and Q breathing warmly against his shoulder and HFY standing watch in the distance, the human realized something that the scientists back on his colony would probably never believe. These creatures, these predators with their sharp teeth and killing claws, were capable of something that looked exactly like love. They had taken this strange human into their pack. They had made him family. And in return, Tayo had found something in this jungle that he had never had before, even in the cities of his childhood. He had found home. 6 weeks into the crash, on a night when the wind came down from the mountains with teeth, Tayo's suit died. It was not a sudden thing. Death never is, he thought. It comes slowly, taking pieces of you bit by bit until there is nothing left. The power cell had been failing for weeks. Tayo had been careful about what systems he used, turning off the heating in the afternoons, limiting the lights to only what was necessary. But power did not last forever, and his suit had been old even before the crash. The battery had been running on nothing but hope and mechanical stubbornness for the past 10 days. That night the suit simply stopped. Tayo felt it happen. The gentle hum that had become part of his life went silent. The heating system, which had kept him warm during the cold nights, shut down. The heads-up display, which showed his vital signs and the time and the direction of north, flickered once and went black. In the darkness of the jungle, Tayo sat up slowly, his breath coming in clouds of white mist in the suddenly freezing air. "Well," he said to the 3 cubs who were sleeping around him, "this is it, I think. This is how I die." The temperature would drop to freezing soon, then lower than that. His body, already weakened by weeks of poor food and constant pain, would slow down. His heart would beat slower and slower, and then it would stop. Tayo had read about hypothermia in medical training. He knew exactly what it would feel like. First, the cold would hurt, then it would stop hurting, and that was worse because that meant your body was shutting down, and then you would fall asleep, and you would not wake up. He should have been afraid. Instead, he was almost peaceful. At least the cubs would have learned enough to survive without him. They could hunt now. They knew the jungle. They were strong and getting stronger every day. They would not starve. The 3 cubs woke up as soon as his body began to shake. Jiwon lifted her head first, her intelligent amber eyes opening in the darkness. She made a questioning sound, a soft chirp. Tayo tried to explain, though he knew the cubs would not understand his words. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm getting cold. My suit is broken. I don't know how to fix it. I don't think I can stay warm tonight without it." HFY stood up. Q stirred, making sleepy sounds. The cubs did not panic. They had learned panic from their early weeks alone, and they did not like the feeling. Instead, they moved together with purpose. HFY positioned himself along Tayo's back. his large body pressing against the human's spine. Q moved to Taio's chest, his warm body covering the human's heart. Ji-won, small and careful, tucked herself against Taio's legs, her body like a furnace despite her small size. The cubs began to make a low, thrumming sound, almost like a purr if a machine could purr. It was a sound Taio had never heard before, but it filled him with warmth and comfort. He realized, as he lay there surrounded by the three young predators, that they were sharing their body heat with him. They were giving him their own warmth, because they had learned over weeks of togetherness that when one member of the pack was in danger, the pack protected that member. Taio felt tears rolling down his face, but they were not tears of fear anymore. They were tears of something else, something he couldn't find a word for. The night stretched on. The cubs did not move. They maintained their position around him, their bodies warm against his, their breath synchronized with his own breath. Taio realized that they were not just keeping him warm. They were connecting with him on a level deeper than words. They were saying, "We are pack. We stay together. This is what pack does. This is what family means." When morning came, pale light filtered through the jungle canopy, and Taio could finally see what the night had hidden. Ji-won bore a long scar along her jaw. It was fresh, still bleeding slightly where the wound was deepest. Taio stared at it in shock. When had this happened? During the night? He had been focused on the cold, on his own survival. He had not noticed one of his family members being hurt. "Ji-won," Taio whispered, and he picked the small cub up carefully. He examined the wound, trying to understand how it had gotten there. The scar was long and deliberate, the kind of wound that came from another predator's claws. Something had come during the night. Something dangerous. Something that could kill. And Ji-won had borne the mark of the encounter while keeping watch, while protecting the pack, while keeping Taio warm. "I'm sorry," Taio said, and his voice broke like waves on rock. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I can't protect you the way your mother could. I'm weak. I'm fragile. I'm just a human." Ji-won made a sound, soft and questioning. She looked at her own wound, then looked at Taio's injured leg, the one he had dragged around the jungle for weeks, the one that had never properly healed and probably never would. She reached up with one clawed hand and very gently touched the scar tissue on his leg. Taio held his breath. Then Ji-won released a series of clicking sounds, sounds that were deliberate and somehow wise. Taio did not know what the sounds meant in the language of the Vextharians, but he understood the meaning in his heart. Ji-won was saying something like, "We both have scars. We both have wounds. We both survive. This is what pack does. This is what family is." Taio carefully treated Ji-won's wound, using the last of his medical supplies from his emergency kit. He wrapped it gently with cloth and made sure the blood had stopped. The scar would be there forever, a mark of courage and protection, just like the human's injury would be there forever. As the day warmed up and the jungle came alive with the sounds of animals and wind and life, Taio sat with Ji-won in his lap, and he understood something that scientists and soldiers and politicians would never understand. These creatures were not animals in the way humans thought about animals. They were not mindless beasts. They felt things. They thought about things. They made choices based on love and loyalty and something that could only be called honor. Hail approached and lay down next to Taio, his head resting on the human's shoulder. Q joined them, making small content sounds, and the four of them, 3 predators and 1 human, sat together in the morning light, each one bearing marks of struggle and survival, each one proud to be part of a pack that would face any danger together. Later, when Taio looked back on his life, he would remember this moment as the moment everything changed. Not because of what happened to him, but because of what he finally understood about what it meant to be truly alive. It was not about being the strongest. It was not about being the fastest or the smartest or the most equipped. It was about being part of something larger than yourself. It was about having family who would stand with you in the darkness and keep you warm when everything else failed. The scar on Jiwon's jaw healed slowly. It never went away completely, but the small female wore it like a badge of honor because it meant she had fought. It meant she had survived. It meant she was Pac. The rescue shuttle landed 73 days after the crash. Teo detected it first through the vibrations in the ground. He had learned to read the jungle with his body now, the way the earth spoke through his feet and his hands. The vibrations came first, a deep thrumming that only large, heavy things could make. Then came the sound, a roar that cut through the jungle like a knife. Teo knew that sound. It was the sound of human engines. It was the sound of rescue. The three cubs sensed his sudden tension immediately. Animals could always read the moods of their pack members, and they read Teo like an open book. Hai-Il stood up, his body going rigid. Q moved closer to Jiwon protectively. The small scar on Jiwon's jaw seemed to brighten as the cub's muscles tensed. They could feel that something was coming, something was changing. "It's okay," Teo said, but his voice was uncertain. He did not know if it was okay. He did not know what would happen when the rescue team saw the three cubs. "These are my kind. These are my people. They are family too." The shuttle broke through the jungle canopy like a metal bird falling from the sky. It landed 100 meters away, hard enough to shake the ground. The engines powered down with a shrieking sound that made all three cubs flatten their bodies to the ground in automatic fear response. Then the shuttle door opened and humans began to emerge. Teo counted them as they came out. 5 humans in heavy tactical gear, carrying weapons that glinted in the light. The weapons were not visible in a threatening way yet, but Teo knew they were weapons. He had seen weapons before. The leader was Captain Minho, tall and broad-shouldered, with her dark hair pulled back and her expression carved from stone. Minho had been Teo's commanding officer on the colony. She was a good soldier and a careful leader. Minho's eyes scanned the jungle, looking for survivors. When they found Teo, standing between the 3 predator cubs and the rescue team, her expression went through several changes very quickly. Relief, shock, confusion, alarm. "Teo!" Minho called out, and she started to walk forward. Then she saw the 3 cubs clearly, and she stopped. Her hand moved to her weapon. "Step away from the creatures, Captain," she commanded, her voice hard and official. "Step away from them now." The cubs made sounds at this, low grinding noises that meant fear and possible aggression. Teo could feel the energy changing, the moment becoming dangerous. He had to make a choice. He could move away from the cubs. He could show the rescue team that he was human, that he was on their side. He could probably get on the shuttle and be rescued. That was the logical choice. That was the human choice. Teo did not move. "They are not threats, Minho," he said, his voice steady. "Stand down. These are cubs. They are orphaned cubs, and they are under my protection." The rescue team exchanged looks with each other, confused and uncertain. Minho's hand stayed on her weapon. "Teo, those are Vexitharian apex predators. The data says they are one of the most dangerous species on this planet. Get away from them or we will have to shoot." "They're cubs," Teo said again, and this time his voice was harder, more certain. "They are intelligent, capable of reasoning, and they form complex social bonds. If you harm them, you will be committing an act of violence against sapient beings. I cannot allow that." One of the other rescue team members lowered her weapon slightly. This was Dr. Yuna, the expedition's xenobiologist. She had studied alien creatures for 15 years. Her eyes were on the cubs, moving slowly, carefully, trying to understand what she was seeing. "Captain," Dr. Yuna said carefully to Minho, "how long have you been in contact with these creatures?" Teo answered before Minho could speak. 73 days. Since the day the Aurora crashed. Their mother was dead. They were dying. I found them, and I kept them alive, and they kept me alive. Dr. Yuna moved slightly closer, her movements slow and careful. Hai-Il watched her but did not attack. Q made a questioning sound. Jiwon's scar caught the light as she tilted her head. Dr. Yuna observed all of this and nodded slowly to herself. "Look at their body language," Dr. Yuna said to Minho. "They are not aggressive. They are protective. They are positioned around him not to attack, but to defend. This is pack behavior. This is family behavior." "I don't care if it is friendly pack behavior," Minho said. "We cannot take 3 predators on the shuttle. The agreement with the colony—" "I don't care about the agreement," Teo interrupted, and his voice was like ice. "Where they go, I go. You can rescue me, or you can leave me here. But these cubs, these 3 members of my pack, are not being left behind." Minho stared at him. Her subordinates stared at him. Even Dr. Yuna stared at him, one eyebrow raised in surprise at his intensity. Teo realized that he probably looked terrible. His suit was torn and patched. His hair was long and unkempt. His face was scarred from small cuts and scratches. His left leg was bent at an angle that made his limp more pronounced. He probably looked like he had gone insane, like the jungle had broken his mind and claimed him for its own. "Captain," Dr. Yuna said quietly, "I need to document these creatures. Whatever we decide to do, I need to understand what we are looking at. With your permission?" Minho did not grant permission, but she did not refuse either. She simply stood there, weapon at her side, watching Teo and the 3 cubs with an expression that was difficult to read. Dr. Yuna approached slowly, her hands visible and open. She had spent years learning how to approach frightened animals. She knew that sudden movements meant death. When she was close enough, she knelt down slowly, making herself smaller and less threatening. Hai-Il watched her, but did not attack. Q approached her with curiosity. Jiwon watched from behind Tai-O's leg. "They are remarkable," Dr. Yuna said softly, her scanner already working to collect data. "Look at the neural structures. Look at the social positioning. This is not base animal instinct. This is deliberate choice. This is loyalty." She looked up at Teo. "Have you been communicating with them?" "Every day," Teo said. "They have a complex language, sound-based with subsonic components. I have learned maybe 50 distinct vocalizations. I have taught them to recognize several human concepts." Dr. Yuna stood up and walked back to Minho. She spoke quietly, but Teo could hear her words. "Captain, I believe we are looking at a first contact situation. These creatures are sapient. They are intelligent beings. Separating them from this human would be trauma to all of them. If we force this separation, we may be committing what would be classified as torture or abuse of sapient beings." Minho's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. She was a good officer. She was a person who followed rules and regulations. But she was also a person who understood the weight of morality and conscience. "We will need to bring this to the colony government," Minho said finally. "The decision is above my command level now. Captain Teo, you and the creatures will board the shuttle. We will take you to Kepler Station first, where you can receive medical treatment and the creatures can be properly assessed. After that, the colony leaders will decide what happens next." Teo felt a wave of relief wash through him. The cubs, sensing his emotional change, relaxed their tense postures. Hai-Il's tail began to move slowly. A sign Teo had learned meant contentment or approval. Jiwon leaned against his leg, and Q made a soft clicking sound that seemed to be approval. "Thank you," Teo said to Minho. "Thank you for understanding." As the rescue team helped Teo to his feet, as the cubs were gently herded toward the shuttle with Teo between them and any possible threat, the human captain realized that everything had changed. The simple choice he had made 73 days ago, the decision to help 3 orphaned cubs instead of walking away, was now going to reshape his entire future. There would be no going back to his old life. There would be no simple return to the colony. He was bound to these 3 creatures now, for better or worse, until the end of his life. But as he felt Jiwon press against his leg and Hae-il walk beside him and Q follow close behind, Teo realized that he would not change his choice for anything. Whatever came next, at least they would face it together. The debate lasted 2 days. 2 days of meetings and arguments and discussions that went in circles like predators hunting prey. Teo sat in the medical bay of the rescue shuttle while doctors examined him, treating his injuries, checking his body for infections and damage. His left leg needed surgery. The break was worse than he had thought. The infection that had developed around the wound could have killed him if he had gone much longer without treatment. The doctors told him he was lucky. They used that word as if luck was something real, something that could save a person's life. The rescue team's medical officer was Dr. Kwan, a serious man who had worked in the colony for 5 years. He examined Teo's whole body with careful precision, measuring and documenting every injury. As he worked, he asked questions about the cubs. "How did you manage to keep them alive with no proper food or medical equipment?" Dr. Kwan asked, wrapping a clean bandage around Teo's leg. "I hunted," Teo said simply. "I learned their language and their behaviors. I cared for them the way I would care for any member of my family." Dr. Kwan made a sound that might have been respect or disbelief. It was hard to tell with him. Meanwhile, Dr. Yuna was working in the observation chamber, using sophisticated equipment to analyze the data she had collected on the 3 cubs. Her scanner had recorded neural patterns, biological markers, and behavioral responses. She was compiling what would become the most important scientific documentation of an alien species contact in human history. The reports she was writing would change everything. In the bridge area of the shuttle, Minho was sending reports back to the colony. Her messages were cautious and detailed. She presented the facts without judgment, letting the information speak for itself. But everyone on the shuttle knew that the colony leaders would have to make a decision about whether to accept 3 alien predators into the research facility. On the 2nd day of the voyage, a colony-wide broadcast was sent to the shuttle. The message came from Governor Seo Jin, the highest authority in the colony. His voice was careful and measured as he laid out the official position. "The decision has been made at the highest level," Governor Seo Jin said through the communication system. "We cannot accept 3 apex predators into the main settlement. The risk to our people is too high. However, we acknowledge the evidence that these creatures may be sapient. Therefore, we are prepared to allow a research facility on Kepler Station to house both Captain Teo and the 3 creatures for scientific study and observation. Any human who chooses to remain with the creatures must understand that they cannot return to the colony proper. This is permanent separation." The message ended. The shuttle went quiet. Teo, listening from the medical bay, felt something settle in his chest. He understood what the governor was saying without saying it directly. The colony would not accept him anymore. He was marked now, contaminated by his association with predators. If he returned to the settlement, he would bring danger, or at least the leadership believed he would. It did not matter what the truth was. What mattered was what people believed, and they believed that apex predators were threats. Dr. Kwan entered the medical bay shortly after the broadcast. He sat down on a stool next to Tayo's bed. "I reviewed your condition," Dr. Kwan said. "You will recover. Your leg will heal, though you will always have a slight limp. Your other injuries are healing well. In about 6 weeks, you should be fully functional." "Thank you," Tayo said. "I also reviewed your medical history," Dr. Kwan continued. "According to your records, you are a solitary person. You have not been in a long-term relationship. You have no family connections. Most of your life before the crash, you were alone." Tayo did not know where this conversation was going. "That's true," he said. "Yet you chose to spend 73 days with 3 alien predators instead of trying to survive alone," Dr. Kwan said. "You shared your food with creatures that could have killed you. You risked your life for them. Why?" Tayo thought about the question. It was a good question, the kind of question that required an honest answer. "Because I was not alone anymore," Tayo said finally. "For 73 days I had family. I had creatures who cared whether I lived or died. I had a pack. I had something to live for besides just surviving. I could not have done that and then walked away." Dr. Kwan nodded slowly. "The cubs will remain in the containment area for now," he said. "They will be observed but not harmed. You can visit them, but there will be restrictions. You understand this?" "I understand," Tayo said. Dr. Yuna came to the medical bay that evening. She looked tired, but excited. She had papers in her hands, filled with data and notes and illustrations. "I have completed my initial analysis," Dr. Yuna said, and she sat down in the chair Dr. Kwan had used. "Tayo, what you have documented is extraordinary. These creatures have neural complexity that rivals human brain development. Their social structure shows sophisticated semantics. They exhibit what can only be described as grief-bonding behavior, a psychological phenomenon that was previously believed to be unique to certain mammalian species and humans." She showed him her reports. There were brain scans showing the cubs' neural pathways. There were behavioral charts showing the complex communication patterns. There were genetic analyses showing no connection to other predator species on the planet. "They are mourning their mother," Dr. Yuna said, pointing to one section of her report. "And simultaneously, they have adopted you as a replacement pack leader figure. The psychological bond is as real as any human family structure. It is documented and measurable and absolutely undeniable." "Will the colony listen?" Tayo asked. "I think so," Dr. Yuna said. "Once they understand what we are dealing with, I believe they will have to reconsider. To separate these cubs from you would be causing trauma to sapient beings. It would be unethical." When the shuttle finally arrived at Kepler Station, a orbital facility that circled the third moon, Tayo had to make a choice. Minho met with him in the station commander's office. "The colony government has offered you several options," Minho said, laying out papers on the desk. "First, you can take a position at the research station here, permanently. You will study the creatures with Dr. Yuna. The station is small, but it is home. Second, you can request reassignment to another colony elsewhere in the system. You can leave the creatures behind, resume your career, have a normal life again." Tayo looked at the papers but did not read them. He did not need to read them. He already knew what his answer would be. "Or third," Minho continued, "you can retire from the colony entirely. You would receive a pension. You could live anywhere, but you could not return to colony society." "The third option," Tayo said immediately. "I retire." Minho looked at him for a long moment. "You understand that you may never see another human city again. You may never return to human civilization as you knew it?" "I understand," Tayo said, "and I accept it. These 3 cubs gave me their trust. They kept me alive. They made me part of their family. I cannot abandon them now, close enough to family. That is what I said to them on the first day. I meant it then, and I mean it now." Minho signed the paperwork that made it official. Tayo was no longer Captain Tayo. He was no longer an officer of the colony. He was simply Tayo, a human who had chosen a different path. That night, as Tayo was being shown to his new quarters at the research station, he passed the containment area where the 3 cubs were being kept. They were behind transparent aluminum walls, safe but confined. When Hi-Il saw Tayo, the large cub made a sound that was full of joy and recognition. Q jumped up from where he was sleeping. Ji-won's scarred face turned toward the human, and her eyes reflected the light like fire. "Tomorrow," Tayo said through the transparent wall. "Tomorrow we will all be together again, I promise you. I will never leave you. We are pack. We are family. That will not change." The cubs pressed their faces against the transparent material, so close they could almost touch. Tayo placed his hand against the material on his side, and the 3 cubs placed their claws against it on their side. Separated by only a thin layer of material, the 4 members of the pack reached toward each other across the divide. It was not a perfect reunion. It was not the end of their struggles. But it was a beginning, and for the first time since the crash, Tayo felt complete. Whatever came next, at least he would face it with his family by his side.